Of the 12th of June. I'd like to welcome all the council members present and members of the public and those online. I'm Councillor Mark Long, I'm chairman of the committee. Somebody's got feedback? Thank you. Right, just some, still going? Just some housekeeping. In case of a fire alarm, please exit the doors and the building and make your way to the far end of the car park. Toilets are outside the door on the left, water is outside the door on the right. A reminder, this is a public meeting and members of the public are welcome to listen to the debate today, but unless registered as a speaker, you are not able to take part and speak. We are live webcasting today, so can I please remind members to use their microphones and remember to turn them off when not speaking. And also, can I ask members to silence or switch off their mobile phones, please, so they don't go off in the meeting, which I'm just doing. Right, in terms of how items are presented, the order for each application is as follows. The planning case officer will present their report. Any objector will speak. Any supporter will then speak. Any parish or town council representative will then speak. Then there's the opportunity for the ward member or ward members to speak on the application. Council members of the committee will be able to ask questions of each speaker for clarity, on points of clarity. At the conclusion of the debate on each application, the members will vote and come to a decision. At this point, I would like to ask the officers and councillors at the top table to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Amelia Bolter, Senior Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to this committee. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Bernard Taylor. I'm Vice Chair of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Fairbairn. I'm Head of Legal Services and the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Houselander and I'm standing in for Pat Weimer. I'm the Head of Development Management of West Devon and I'm standing in for him for this committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Adrian Noon, Principal Planning Officer, Case Officer for the first application. Thank you.
Thank you. First, can I have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillor Oram. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, you've had the minutes of the meeting of the 8th of May 2025. Can I please have agreement, a show of hands, that they are correct minutes? Propose. Second. Thank you, members. There are no agenda item 2, urgent business. There are no items of the Chair's urgent business. Item 3, division of the agenda. There's no reason to divide the agenda today. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members, are there any declarations of interest that you wish to make on any of the applications today? No, thank you. Item 5, public participation. The list of speakers has been circulated to members and you have them with you. Can I just now ask David Fairbairn to take us through the making decisions slide? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, the committee have heard me say this many times, but members of the public who may be less familiar with the planning decision-making process, I'll just explain how the committee will come to its decision. In making its decision, the committee has to have regard to the development plan and any material considerations. The development plan is the joint local plan and any made neighbourhood plan that applies to the area or the parish in which the application is made for. The committee's decision will be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations suggest otherwise, and where planning policies in the development plan, which is to be read as a whole document, where those policies pull in different directions, the committee will exercise their planning judgment as to which policy should have precedence over the other in terms of how they apply to the particular application. I think that's it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbairn. We now move on to agenda item 6, planning applications. The first application, 6A, is 152724 HHO Quarry Cottage, Salcombe. At this point, I would like to hand over to Mr. Fairbairn to update us on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be asking the committee to defer consideration of this application. There have been, although valid notices and certificates have been given in respect of the application, there is some land which is unregistered, and there is a question about whether or not this land is part of the curtilage of the dwelling house to which the householder application relates. To be a householder application, the development must be either affecting the existing dwelling house or be within the curtilage of the existing dwelling house. And there are questions that have been raised. We are posing questions. We've asked for further information from the applicant, and the reason for the deferral is to allow the applicant to either provide that further information or to withdraw the application and resubmit. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Rake, you have a question?
Not a question. I was going to move that we defer on the monitoring officer's advice.
Thank you, Councillor Rake. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Donnet. Can I please have a show of hands for deferral of this application? Thank you. Do I have any? Apologies, sorry. Certainly. Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask how the curtilage will be determined. I mean, is it about whether the land is in the ownership of that person, or is it actually about the definition of the household curtilage itself? And if so, how will that be determined? Is that because of a previous planning application or something?
That's a very good question. And I could give you a long list. In fact, I could send you the email I sent to the chairman. Basically, the test is whether it's part and parcel of the buildings. Ownership is a factor. Future, past, present ownership, but also the physical layout. There's a very long list of factors, and it's a question of fact and degree in each case. It might have an element of size, but it's not guaranteed that it's necessarily has to be small. So you might find it, but it's certainly not necessarily the equivalent of the planning unit or the other unit of occupation. So I'll drop you a note. I'm quite happy to share a note with the rest of the committee as well, if that helps. But
I'd just be interested.
It's not straightforward, and it's multifaceted.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbairn. If you can send to committee members, therefore they'll see the advice that has been given and received. Members, can I now recommence I've had a proposer seconder. Councillor Abbott, you looked as though you were going to ask a question.
Well, the reason that the vote is already panned out in the way it's going and is not unanimous is that I'm used to the planning applications being independent of ownership, because it is a matter of civil law, and we don't take the judgment on civil law here. We judge within the joint local plan.
I can explain. Sorry, absolutely nothing to do with ownership. And as I said, the correct notices and certificates were given. To be a householder application, it has to be either development which is affecting an existing dwelling house, or be development within the curtilage of an existing dwelling house for a purpose that is incidental to that dwelling house. The suggestion here is that this is not a valid application.
Yeah, you're going to win your vote. I think I need a longer conversation about this and some of the terms that are being used. So I'm just going to stay where I am.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. It's understandable. I've seen the advice and read it a number of times. Now, Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, sorry, if I may. The question raised by our legal advice is questioning whether it's a valid application. But it's already been judged as a valid application, surely by the planning department, by virtue of it having been posted on this posted on the portal and brought to this committee. So we're doubting our own decision. I just want to check where we are exactly, if I may. Thank you.
Chairman, I think that's a discussion for another venue.
We can perhaps have a wider discussion after the meeting concludes on the various points on this. But can I take it now to a vote? Can I please have a show of hands for deferral of this application, please? Thank you. Thank you. Those against? None against. Any abstentions? 2 abstentions.
9 for, 2 abstentions.
That's 9 for deferral, 2 abstentions. The application is deferred. Thank you, members. And thank you to members of the public and others who are listening, and for your forbearance on this, but we needed to do this. So apologies for the journey in on pretty abysmal morning, but thank you very much. Members, we now will move on to agenda item 6B. We have a change of officers, so we'll have a few minutes while that is set up. And can I thank Mr. Noon for attending.
Thank you, happy to be here.
Thank you.
Just before Charlotte speaks.
Can I just say, those members of the public who were here for the first one, you can leave if you wish, but if you wish to see the rest of the committee, then you're happy to stay. Thank you.
Stop and rain at 1 o'clock.
Right, we'll now move on to agenda item 6B, 041525 FUL, car park opposite the Lynx Hotel in Thurleston. The case officer is Charlotte Harrahane. Can I pass over to you for your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is a part retrospective application for the installation of parking pay meter, number plate recognition camera, signage, and then an element which is not retrospective, which is for levelling and resurfacing of the car park. So the site is a car park. It's a privately owned car park opposite the Links Court. So it's between Thurleston and South Milton. Just a closer view of the car park there. So the application's been brought to committee by Councillor Dennis, who has asked that the committee consider whether enough has been done to consider the impact on the landscape. So we are in a sensitive location. We're in the national landscape, the undeveloped coast, and the heritage coast. So there was a question when we were at the site visit on Monday about this little kind of dogleg area here and the ownership of that. So just to clarify, this is the application site, the red line of the application site. But if you look at this is the land registry, so the extent of the ownership does actually kind of complete that little triangle corner. But that section where the post is that we talked about on Monday is not part of the application site. So as I said, there are some retrospective elements. So just to kind of show you, so we've got the red circle is the camera, the green circle are the 2 enforcement signs on the northern side, we've got the yellow is the pay machine, the blue is the entrance sign, and the purple is a tariff sign on the southern side. So just to show members in context, as I said, these parts are retrospective. So we've got the camera, and then we've got it on a plan view. We've got the pay machine, which is the part of the proposal includes a glazed canopy around it, which isn't installed yet, but just so members are aware that that's also would be part of the permission if that was granted. We've got the enforcement signs here, as you can see, for those of you that weren't there on Monday, just to clarify. So the signs were put up with these yellow signs, and a retrospective application was submitted for those last year, which was refused. Officers were concerned about the number of signs and also the yellow and the kind of the design of them, given where we are and the sort of the sensitivity of the landscape. So this application would replace the yellow signs with these white and green signs that you can see, and also some of the poles. So the number of signs has also been reduced, so a couple of the poles would be removed, and that would also be secured by condition. Where's that gone? Why has it just gone black? Yeah, I wasn't even touching anything, so that's not even something I pressed. Yeah, just try again. Yeah, just make it bigger. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Right. As we were. Yeah, so you can see the yellow sign, but then you can see the design that's part of this application and would have to be installed should this be approved. And then we've got the enforcement sign, which again is on the southern side, so the lower side of the site. And the entrance sign, again, with the white and green design that would replace it. So onto the resurfacing works, which, as I say, are not retrospective. This hasn't been carried out yet. So again, those of you who were there on Monday would have seen it is very holy. You know, it's not a great car park to drive into at the moment. There's a lot of potholes. There's also a problem because it's quite a slopey site, and this grass area here gets quite boggy in wet weather. So the idea is, if you can see, there's a section here. So it wouldn't be completely levelled because it is quite a substantial slope at the moment, but there would just be some minor resurfacing. So you can see the dotted line, hopefully you can see that is the existing level. And then this solid line is the proposed level. So just some of this higher level would essentially just be brought down to the southern side, with a change in levels at the bottom of about 0.5 metre. So the road would be made up, so it would be a permeable surface, which again would sort of help with the drainage of the site. There's an example of the surfacing here, but as you'll have seen from the report, because we are in such a sensitive location, we are recommending a condition that the final kind of colour and finish is agreed with officers before it's installed, just so that we can make sure that it really is kind of the most appropriate colour given sort of the beachy surroundings. But some kind of sort of natural earthy tone is proposed, but we would have control over that final finish through a condition. The council's drainage team have reviewed the application. They're happy with sort of the makeup of the road and the permeability, and they've just recommended a condition, a compliance condition. So the main issue really is that we are in a very sensitive landscape position with sort of multiple designations. Obviously, as I did mention on site, you know, whilst these signs are, you know, they're quite utilitarian, but they do need to be visible so that people can see them. Otherwise, people will get fined. So we've also got kind of in the benefits of the site, you've got the better drainage of the site. You've got improved parking provision because that southern side will be usable through more of the year. It won't be turned into a big mud puddle. And officers are satisfied that with this revised design using the green and the white, which is sort of more in keeping with the landscape, that the proposal is acceptable and conditional approval is therefore recommended.
Thank you, Ms Harahane. Members, any questions of the officer?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, have we in our planning rules or have any sort of regulations on height of signs, the same as we do garden fences against the highway?
No, so we wouldn't be prescriptive about it. And obviously, if you're with fences and things, I think obviously there's the permitted development heights, but that's not applicable here. There isn't sort of permitted development for signs, heights of signs, and also as a planning application has been submitted anyway. We're just considering whether we're happy with the heights of these signs. I did reference in my report, there is Devon County, no, not Devon County, sorry, Department for Transport has kind of guidance on transport signs. There wasn't anything that was directly applicable to this, but they did say that when there's signs where people might be walking past and things like that, there is a minimum height recommended so that obviously people don't bang their heads on the signs. But to answer, there isn't a specific height that we would require.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could we go back to the first photo, please? Because there was some behind the thing which I didn't. Oh yeah, no, sorry, not the first photo. The that one. What is there something yellow on the stick behind?
Yeah, it's one of those pay here signs.
Oh right, it's pay here sign. Sorry, I didn't get to the thing. Yeah, okay, thank you. My question relates to the size of these signs and the height of them and the size of the camera or the height of the pole of the camera in particular. So I think there is a note in the documentation about comparison with other nearby parking sites. I think it might be Thurleston Golf Club. Have we had a look at the heights of the signs and the heights of the camera on other sites in nearby locations to make a comparison? So to, make a decision or make a recommendation about what is reasonable or what is needed in a site like this. Thank you.
So I haven't been to other sites to directly compare this with those. I think what we obviously, need to bear in mind is we have to consider what's proposed on this site and is it appropriate. I think, some of the representations did comment that the golf club has lower signs, which they do. But for the reasons set out in the report, I feel like the signs here are appropriate. In terms of why the camera is as high as it is and things like that, I'm not a car park expert, but I think the applicant is speaking in support, so it might be worth asking them a question about why things have been designed the way they have.
Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Thinking about how it's that bit of landscape there, just flat car park with possibly a bit of low hedge all the way around. Could we require more landscaping? Maybe. I mean, for example, that pole sticking out like that. I'm assuming it's facing into the car park, so it's not going to be a problem in terms of other people's privacy outside. But is there no way that something could be just planted behind it, which would start to sort of minimise that impact of that? Because it's the starkness, isn't it, when you've got a low hedge and then things just sticking straight out at right angles. Whereas if you've got something a little bit softer around it, could we require that kind of landscaping? It wouldn't take away or obscure the camera or the signage being visible, but it would just make it a little bit softer in the landscape. Or is it because it's that landscape itself is so flat that we have to sort of put that first?
So there is a condition requiring landscaping works to be provided before any resurfacing works take place. The main reason that we sort of added that was really to, I understand. I'll come on to, so I'll come on to that. So the main reasoning for the landscape condition was for this area down here, just to make sure that green landscaping remained around the site. In terms of landscaping around the camera, I think the problem you can have, especially when it is so tall, is anything that you try to do to screen that might kind of look a bit artificial in itself in such an open area. Realistically, you're not going to be able to hide that camera. It's 3.9 meters tall. So, I mean, obviously we'll review a landscaping scheme when it comes in, but I'm not sure that would necessarily solve a problem without sort of looking a bit odd in itself.
But a tree behind it wouldn't go amiss, and eventually it could be stuck to the tree.
Yeah, it's so exposed up there. I'm not a landscape expert, but I think whether you could find something that would grow and thrive in that area might be tricky. But as I say, we have got landscaping to be submitted. but yeah, I'd be slightly concerned about relying on landscaping to hide that camera pole.
Well, not just the camera, I'm thinking about those rather chunky sort of paper machines and stuff like that. And in fairness, at Torbay Hospital, I think they've done quite a good job. They look like it's all quite softened into landscape. Not sure that's the best thing to start from, but anyway.
Councillor Panel.
Two questions. Could we condition the greyness of that pole is quite stark. Could we condition it's green perhaps? Is our discretion? And I've seen that it's proposed to change those yellow signs around the car park to green. Does that include the signs at the pay machine, because they're quite stark as well?
Yeah, so all the yellow signs would be replaced with kind of a white and green equivalent. Yeah. Oh, sorry, and I mean, if members really thought that was necessary, obviously if we want to put a condition on, we do have to make sure that it meets the condition test. But if members felt that it did and that was what was needed, I don't see why not. No.
Councillor Nix.
Following on from the previous question, obviously that I think Councillor Bonham said earlier about the yellow pay sign on the top. We're changing all the rest of the yellow for green and white. Are we discussing changing that for green or white as well?
That isn't part of the proposal. Again, this might be a question for the applicant. It's a more technical side of it, but as far as I'm aware, that's a pretty standard indicator of where a parking machine is. The only thing I would say is obviously we're concerned about kind of the views of the coast and things like that. That is kind of set quite far back into the site. But yeah, that might be a technical question for the applicant about whether that could be changed or whether that has to be yellow.
Thank you. Councillor Bonham.
Sorry, very quickly, can we go back to the site, the layout, because that was rushed over quite quickly. Yeah. We only have one sign, the green one on the top left in that picture, that is sort of adjacent to the coast path now, or very near the coast path. Yeah, that's at the exit location. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any further questions of Ms Harahane? If not, thank you. We do not have an objector to speak today, but we do have supporter Chris Marsden. Mr Marsden, if you'd like to come forward for your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Dear Chair and members of the committee, my name is Chris Marsden and I'm here representing SIP Car Parks for the applicant today. We've diligently worked through a comprehensive process of applications and pre-applications, and this has led to the positive support of the Senior Planning Officer and South Hams District Council's Planning Department. I have previously engaged with the local parish council and tried to address any concerns and mitigate any concerns in that matter. And throughout the pre-application consultation phase, we've taken proactive steps, making significant amendments to the proposal to fully align with the planning officer's requirements. The application is generally related to the additional signage, and consent of the car park is not in question, as the car park has full planning permissions. In simplistic terms, we're requesting a few extra signs and to bring the car park up to modern standards that the general public expects. Following pre-application discussions with the planning officer and confirmed the following key adaptations, the number of the signs has been reduced and their height significantly lowered to safeguard the integrity of the undeveloped coast and heritage coast policy areas, as well as the South Devon area of outstanding natural beauty. The chosen white and green colour scheme with black text has been selected to minimise visual intrusion with the landscape after recommendations for this colour scheme was put forward. Crucially, signs have been strategically removed from the most sensitive areas and sensitive vantage points to preserve the scenic coastal character. The proposed resurfacing will ensure the long-term maintenance of the site and effectively mitigate erosion. We've approached it with a sensitive arm, making sure that it remains permeable with a natural aesthetic similar to other local car parks in the area. Given these adjustments and the positive recommendation from the planning department, we firmly believe that this application merits approval. We have presented a scheme that not only complies with the local planning policy for the area, but also provides necessary and appropriately designed signage for car park patrons so that they are not ticketed without knowledge of there being signs present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Marsden. Members, do you have any questions, Mr Marsden? Councillor Hodgson. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Is parking a problem up there in the sense that do you find lots of other people keep using the parking? It's 32 car parking spaces I just quickly looked at, and it looks still quite capacious. The photo, I think it was a photograph or two that didn't exactly indicate, you know, sort of cars jostling for space. And I'm just wondering if that, you know, because you've got a fair amount of space, is it a problem? You know, do you need to have this sort of regulation in there, or is it or is it just because there's a thought? I mean, if it's just make money, is that the idea? I mean, I'm just asking what the necessity is here, really.
There is a problem with parking enforcement on this site. It's quite common that people don't pay on these car parks. You could issue anything between 1 and 10 tickets a day on a busy day. So yes, there is a requirement for planning for parking enforcement to be present. Also considering the fact that if there was no parking enforcement on it at all, you may end up in a situation where the general public end up jostling for space on a busy day and causing obstruction to other users.
Members, any other questions of Mr Marsden? Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, thanks very much for your presence here and presentation or summary of the case. I'm just wondering why the camera needs to be so high, and you know, that does seem to me, yeah, to be a little excessive. I mean, I know and use this site quite a lot myself, and it is a very exposed site and in a very scenic location. Why does it have to be quite like that in that position? I mean, surely camera at the entrance could be just a couple of feet off the ground, like you know, other parking entrance places. For example, at airports, they don't have a massive high camera. They just have a very low one that takes a photo of the number plate as you enter and exit.
So a camera at the airport, to use your example, is normally on non-pedestrianised areas. If I put a camera at the entrance in a box or whatever to protect it, it will essentially be used as a bin. The same such way as it is at Plymouth in Royal William Yard. They're in 2 little boxes and it basically becomes a local bin. The specifications for the types of ANPR cameras used by most parking companies is that they must be about 3 and 3.9 metres off the ground at minimum. So to use the example that was brought up earlier of the golf course, their camera is higher than mine, except it's on the fence of the courts or something behind. So it is at the minimum, at the maximum minimum it can be.
Thank you. Members, any further question of Mr Marsden? There were a couple of questions that members brought up about the pay here sign. Could it, you know, it's yellow, could it be green as well as the others? I wonder if you could address that. And there was also about the greyness of the poles. There was an indication from one member of could they be green, and there was the comments about the landscaping. As you hear, I wonder if you could sort of address those. Thank you.
Happy to. I'm happy to paint the post any colour you want me to. I'm happy to change the pay here cone. I'm surprised it's not actually in the application itself, but it was my plan to change everything that's yellow into green, just to make it blend in and support the local area. In terms of them being, I think it was brought up, and if I may, it was brought up, why are they not at fence height, sort of like the golf course? But if you look at the golf course, they've got 4 or 5 times the amount of signage that I have. Because at this height, as soon as I park a car in front of it, it becomes invisible to anybody. So we've tried to make it so that if a Range Rover parks in front of it, you might still have a chance of seeing that sign. So that's the reason they're not at waist level. I think it's going to be very difficult to plant a tree of substance behind that camera, given the ground itself and its risk of fall. But happy to mitigate it in terms of painting it or something like that. If there's a tree that anyone from the local area can recommend that will sit there and not fall over on somebody, I'm happy to take a sapling and plant it.
Thank you. Right, no, it's working again now. Thank you. Technology is great. I think that I gave Mr. Marsden the opportunity to, as members had raised it and they didn't bring it forward again. I think the points that Ms. Houselander made are appropriate, and I think it's, you know, we have what's before it. But they've been raised and discussed. Thank you. Any further questions of Mr. Marsden? If not, thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on. We have a statement to be read out by the clerk from South Milton Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. South Milton Parish Council supports the conditions set out in the officer's draft report, but requests the committee to consider the following additional conditions. The signposts are reduced in height except at the entrance, the ANPR camera and the payment machine. This will reduce the visual impact of other signs, as has been done at the adjacent Golf Club car park. The boundary marked out on the site follows a submitted site plan reference 103.55-100 as mentioned during the site visit. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, nobody's here from the Parish Council to be able to have questions taken, but members have heard that. We now move on, statement from the ward member, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dennis sends her apologies for not attending today. As mentioned in the officer's report, this site is an extremely sensitive location and no doubt appreciated by those that attended the site visit. I'm asking the committee today to consider whether as much as possible has been done to negate any impact on the landscape and to preserve and enhance the special This request is in line with the Parish Council's objections. Thank you.
Right, we're back again. Thank you. Obviously, no opportunity to question there. We'll now move on. We've had all the opportunity. We'll now move on to debate this application. Does anybody wish to start with any comments on it? Councillor Panel.
It's a balancing act between protecting our precious landscape and coastal heritage, but also being practical. And I represent this council on a national parking body, and I'm well aware that one of the chief complaints by people who've received tickets for not paying the parking charges is that they weren't aware they were there. And there's a big move to make sure that drivers are aware of the parking charges, and I can see that that's what's driving this application. With another hat, I'm also organising the erection of some signs in my village, and again, we're well aware of the need to have them at a height where they can be seen, and especially above head height, so that people aren't going to strike their heads, because I can imagine that if they did, the car parking firm would fear they're going to be liable. So I can understand the need for the signs. I think they've done well to reduce the number of signs. I'm inclined to support this, and I'll wait to hear what others say, but I'm quite happy to recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Panel. Any other comments on this application? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Yeah, I still go back to trying to kind of accommodate these signs, which are very stark in that sort of, you know, much beloved because it is so stark in the way landscape. And I was just quickly looking, actually, there's a lot of different seagrasses you can get that grow quite tall that could actually soften quite a lot around the impact just from the outside of the car parking area, which I think could be quite easy to plant and would grow. There's sea buckthorn, there's all sorts of things, that big, tall, wavery things, and they just would take the edge off it, I think, because I think it's quite important that we do try to, you know, push for what we can. I think otherwise it's just, well, it's what it is for a car park, but then, you know, the car parks can spoil the area. One thing I did meant to ask the applicant, who's obviously here, is was whether or not there should be some cycle parking, because a lot of people are using bicycles, and especially electric bikes these days, to get to some of these locations. And I didn't see any in the car park. I don't know if we could condition to that to build in more sustainability. Is that a possibility?
Councillor Hodgson, that's not part of the application.
Can't request it as a condition.
You know, you've said it out loud. Whether the Mr. Marsden will take that on board or consider it is up to them, but it's not part of this application.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, firstly, I would start by expressing concern about landscaping. I mean, if you've been to the site, you'll see that trees generally grow in a different direction to most places. They grow horizontally, not vertically. You know, trying to put a tree there is, or even some large bushes, is going to be totally pointless. In fact, the site is quite similar in some ways to the landscape around it. So I'd be very wary of having some plan to make it landscape like the centre of, you know, a town or village. No, but still, I mean, you know, it's a difficult one in that site. I do think the most important question is the balance between having good signs and making sure that users of the car park can see the need to pay, and also to allow enforcement, and the obligation that we have now to give great weight to conserving and enhancing the landscape and scenic beauty. And I think that is a difficult decision, especially when there's a retrospective application. I mean, we can see what's there, but I don't personally feel that the applicant has really gone out of the way to make this application the most sensitive. Also, I question where the signs are, because people leave that car park on foot, generally in 3 directions. One in the entrance where they came in, very few people go that way because there's nothing much there. So there's 2 exits on the left and the right towards the beaches, and there aren't signs in those 2 locations, or there's one, but not on the right hand side, but not on the left hand side. And there could be a small sign low down on the it's at the bottom of the picture because of the orientation. There could be a small sign on the fence there, perhaps, an enforcement sign. The pay machine seems in a very awkward place. You know, it's not where most people park. They park at the other end. And I do worry about the height of the camera sign significantly. I think that's out of proportion. So I'm not really decided yet, but I'm uncomfortable with some of the application. Thank you.
Councillor Bonham, I'll ask the Ms Harrahane to come in, because a lot of the points that you've raised have been addressed through the pre-app on this.
Yeah, so initially, the previous application last year and at the beginning of the pre-app, there was a sign down in this corner, and there was also a sign over here. My concern with that is that those are really the most prominent views out of the site. So if you're in the car park, you're not probably going to look back behind you. You're going to be looking out to the beaches, out along the coast. And so I requested that these signs were removed so that this was kept open. Because I think if you need to pay, you've driven your car into the car park, so you've driven past the signs. Similarly, the pay machine, you know, we want that set back into the site. We don't want clutter on the coastline. You know, the stuff that's back here, we've got development either side. So the kind of the impact of the signs being quite so stark is mitigated by the fact that there are buildings behind them. So that was something that I requested as part of the pre-app, was that anything was removed from this coast. And I don't think that that's detrimental to people using the car park, because as I say, they have to come in this way with their car. So they are definitely going to see the signs that are further back into the site.
Thank you, Ms Harahane. Councillor Allen.
Yes, just to say that on the site visit, I was impressed by the thought and care that had gone into placing these signs. I'm not someone who would normally appreciate signs in a car park, but I think the green and white is extremely tasteful. I thought they were well positioned. I thought you could see them, but you know, but they weren't too obvious if you were walking past. They didn't obscure the view. Absolutely spot on, and slightly an exemplar type of signage in a car park, if I'm totally honest, because they did blend into the background, but they were there when you looked at them, so I was impressed.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Dommett.
I just wanted to highlight the example of a car park on this same beach, but at the other end, where all of the parking paraphernalia is done with natural materials shielding it. So there is wooden fences around the parking meters, and all of the signage have got wooden poles as opposed to metal ones. So it's not impossible to have made changes that would be more fitting for the landscape.
Thank you, Councillor Dommett. Councillor Pannell.
Yeah, I quite like the idea of wooden poles. Maybe that's something that the officers can look at when they discuss this with the applicants. But having heard the members' comments and the officers' comments, I'm prepared to move approval of this in accordance with the officers' recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Pannell. I have
Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Taylor to come in.
Yes, thank you. I'm easily forgotten. Well, not really.
No.
But yeah, I think they've done a good job in, applying what was asked of them at the pre-app. And I think wooden is fine, but the life of wood these days is probably 5, 6, 7 years. So they would be rotted out in that time. I've got experience of this. So I would like to second the proposal for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Have any other comments to be made on this application? If not, we have a proposer and seconder to accept the officer's recommendation of conditional approval. Can I take a vote on that? And could I please have a show of hands for approval, please? Thank you. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Therefore, that application is approved. Oh.
No. You've got, it's your hand out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's 10-4.
So it's 10-4, 1 against. Therefore, that application is approved. Thank you, thank you, members. Thank you. Thank you for those attending. Appreciate it. Thank you. We have a changeover before the next application comes forward. We'll allow that to take place. Thank you. Thank you, members. We are now on agenda item 6C, 051225 FUL, land east of 4 Munro Avenue, Yempton. The officer is Rose Dugard. If I can please ask you to give your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. I'm Rose Dugard, one of the senior planning officers here. So in front of us, we've got the...
Could you move your microphone closer? Thank you.
So in front of us, we have the application for demolition of 4 garages and construction of a dwelling and garage extension at 4 Munro Avenue.
Mr. Dugard, could we try another microphone, because it's not, you're not sort of picking up.
No. Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do shout, sorry. I won't try and shout anyway. Okay, so we are 4 Munro Avenue, which if you see up to the north there, located next to Colleton Park on the left, and then down in the south is Newton Ferrers. It's approximately 2 miles to the built form of Newton Ferrers and 2 miles from Yelmpton, which is, apologies, off that map. So the proposed 3-bedroom dwelling is a contemporary 2-storey dwelling with a single rear element at the back. It's painted render, natural timber cladding, glazed windows, natural slate to the main roof, and a zinc roof to the porch and the rear single-storey elements. There's solar panels proposed on the south elevation, which I believe you can see on the top right, or on both, sorry, on those sketches, and a proposed electric vehicle charging point and air source heat pump. So the neighbourhood plan for Newton and Oss is very clear in that it needs to ensure a balanced and diverse housing stock, which meets local need. This application has gone through pre-app before it got to this stage, and the advice that was given that dwelling size and bedroom provision would be contrary to the neighbourhood plan. Effectively, Newton and Oss Parish Council, for any new dwellings that are reasonable accommodating more than 3 bedrooms, are required to evidence local need, which has not been provided in the course of this application. The dwelling in front of us is for a large 3-bedroom dwelling, which also provides a snug and a study. The dwelling itself far exceeds national space standards, so it's approximately, for national space standards, for 3-bed, 6-person, 2-storey dwellings, 102 square metres, and the proposed dwelling is 167 square metres. In my report, you may have noticed that paragraph 2.9 states that there's no pedestrian link provision between Munro Avenue and the adjacent site of Colleton Park. It's come to our attention this week that there is in fact a path. There's been quite a lot of discussion. However, a part of the Colleton Park permission, their landscaping and section 106, that they would provide this permissive path that attaches not just Munro Avenue, but those cluster of houses there into the new development and also to the end of that development. So it's a very long path, which I did as best I could yesterday and had a walk along it. And so if you'll see in my top picture there, you'll see the red dot of 4 Munro Avenue. The path then runs inside the hedge along Colleton Park, and at some point that will enter into the development. But you'll see my red circle in the bottom left of that top photo, and where it comes out is here in the bottom right photo. So at the moment, it just enters onto the B3 186, and there's no pavement. That at the moment is a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. I believe there's going to be reduced to 40 at some point to join the Newton Ferrers, but I don't know too much detail about that. It still stands that this application is not in accordance with the neighbourhood plan and creates an imbalance in the local housing stock. There are other reasons for refusal other than this unsustainable location, such as draining objection, no unilateral undertaking.
So I do have the head of strategic planning, I think, is online as well with us. Yeah. Because it is still very much dependent on couple. So we recommend refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Gunnard. Members, do you have any? We have Phil Baker online just to add about the location before members so that you can come in on that as well. So Phil Baker, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Appreciate you allowing me to dial in today, not least because it saved me a very wet cycle into the office. I just want to give you a short statement, and I'd like you to kind of think about this at the start of your consideration of the site location. So we always advocate that members and decision makers start at the top and work down. So I'm going to give you a little bit of commentary about site location and clarify what's been consented on the adjacent site at Collerton Park, why that permission was granted, and the extent to which you can consider as relevant that application in the determination of this one. So the application on the adjoining site was for 125 homes, 46 of which are affordable, various commercial business units, boat storage and parking, allotments, and improvements to the existing permissive path. And that was granted in September 2023. That application was considered under policy TTV 27 as a rural exception site, which requires a significant portion of affordable housing to mitigate for the unsuitable and unsustainable site location. So the starting point for consideration at Collerton Park was based on the site being in an unsustainable location that would not normally be released for that use. And the exception site model is designed to deliver significant social benefits to offset the poor spatial location of the site. The reason permission was granted on the adjacent site was that the balance of benefits versus impacts for this application was considered to weigh in favour of the application, but that required a high level of investment in commercial floor space, supporting marine activities, allotments, parkland open space, and improvements to existing paths, in addition to the high percentage of affordable housing for that proposal to be considered acceptable. So that doesn't mean that this, as a site or as an area, can now be considered as a sustainable location for development. It just means that the overall package of benefits for that site, including 46% of affordable housing, was considered sufficient to mitigate the impact of the unsustainable site location. So the application before you today is for a single open market dwelling. There's no significant social or environmental benefits associated with the proposal. It's still well over 2.5 kilometres to the centre of Newton Ferrers and further to Yelmpton. It's a Tier 4 location and needs to be considered at the highest level by policies SPT2 and TTV1. So the adopted JLP policies and the NPPF require proposals to respond to the transport hierarchy, and that means that we need to ensure that walking, cycling and public transport opportunities are secured through new development. Now, I find it hard to believe that anyone is going to walk or cycle into Newton Ferrers with such frequency that it's going to prevent an increase in regular car journeys to either Newton Ferrers or Yelmpton or beyond from this site location. Even when the extended bus service that's supposed to be secured to serve the new homes at Collerton is in place, that would only partially improve the modal shift options from this location, such as the limited frequency that will offer. Now, the extended footpath that has been described to you from the Collerton development only partially improves pedestrian safety by avoiding walking on the highway verge. It does nothing to reduce the distance or improve the topography of the route into the village. Such is that distance and topography that I find it highly unlikely that any new walking infrastructure is going to displace anything other than a negligible number of car journeys into the village and beyond. This location is considered unsustainable because of the poor connectivity to local services and facilities and the minimal opportunities to achieve modal shift to active or sustainable travel options. The presence of the development on the adjacent site does little to improve the inherent shortcomings of this site location. The distances from the site location to local services and facilities do not accord with the walking distances prescribed in policy SPT2 or in the manual streets recommended walking distances. And even if the limited additional facilities that are proposed at the Collerton development were completed, this does not create a new sustainable settlement that would change how we apply the provisions of SPT2 or TTV1. The unsustainable location means that the principle of development cannot be accepted in this location, which is why you have a recommendation of refusal before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Before we move on to questions to Ms. Harahane, is there anybody that has a question for Mr. Baker? Councillor Nix.
Good morning, Mr. Baker. I have a question. Looking at the map that we were given, there are obviously a huge development there already of properties that it's on the end of. So why is it that they're sustainable and?
Okay, so that's exactly what I've been describing. The development adjacent was given permission based on the balance of benefits and impacts of that proposal alone. So that proposal is an exception site. It delivers 40% affordable housing and a load of commercial floor space, marine boat storage, allotments, open parkland, and investment in an additional or extended bus service into the site. That site is considered on its own merits. So that application included a load of additional benefits to mitigate for the unsustainable location of that site. The proposal before you today is for a single open market dwelling that has no additional benefits, and it isn't going to offer anything in terms of affordable housing. So that's what I've gone to lengths to explain to you, is that just because it's adjacent to a site that's already been consented, that consent was given to the adjacent site on balance because of all of the additional benefits that we were securing through that application.
I apologise, because obviously the picture I've got shows what looks like the housing's already there, and that's why I was a little bit confused by the comment. Sorry.
Councillor Panel. Ms. Houselander, if you'd like to come in, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I think you're referring to the housing on Munro Close, I think, is what you were doing, and that's an historic scenario. As I understand it, they were originally built for army personnel. That, in the same way as the Collerton Park, that is not a sustainable location for development. And were that to come to us today, we would not have granted permission for it. It is there, but it doesn't mean to say you then reinforce it with additional dwellings, because the location is unsustainable.
Okay, thank you. I thought I was going a bit mad there. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Panel.
Yeah, can I just ask Mr. Baker about the neighbourhood plan and how this application fits or does not fit with what the neighbourhood plan has to say?
Thank you, Councillor. The case officer has done a very good job of outlining how the size of the dwelling would result in a conflict with the neighbourhood plan policy. The neighbourhood plan policy also aligns very well with Dev 8 policy in the joint local plan, which seeks to ensure that new housing that comes forward redresses any imbalance in the existing housing stock and is aligned with the household sizes that we know that we've got in any given area. The data that you've got there shows that there's already a significant proportion of dwellings in the local area that have got at least 2 empty bedrooms. And there's also a very high proportion of households that comprise only 1 or 2 people. So on that basis, it's not considered to align with what the neighbourhood plan policy seeks to deliver, which is a better correlation between housing size and household size to identify and respond to local housing needs.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Phil. One of the concerns raised by the planning process overall by my residents is that we have a tendency to swallow camels and strain at gnats. And what you're doing here is saying that we swallowed this camel because it was covered in gravy. But is there any gravy that could be applied to the gnat?
What a lovely analogy. I understand that it might seem that there's a degree of inconsistency in terms of how we're applying the policies. The fact is we are having to apply the policies as written. Each decision is taken, or each case is considered on its own merits. And the fact that the adjacent camel was covered in gravy is significant because that mitigation that offset the unsustainable site location was sufficient in the planning balance process to be considered acceptable. There is nothing that can be added to a single open market dwelling here that would mitigate for the unsustainable location of that development. And I understand it looks confusing because there's a large development coming forward on the other side of the hedge. But when you look at the balance of benefits that the adjacent site is delivering, that is why, on balance, members and officers were able to support that, and it's coming forward to deliver an exception site. Whereas there's nothing additional that a single open market dwelling is going to secure in this location.
Councillor Rake, you wish to come back?
Thank you. Yes, and just a sort of secondary question, really. Just so we understand what we're expecting the neighbouring development to bring forth. You mentioned commercial unit. Is that commercial units and boat storage, or is it? So I'm just interested by the interplay of that, because conceivably those commercial units could employ the residents of the proposed dwelling, in which case the sort of transport burden would be reduced. I mean, how do we consider those factors? We don't, because there's absolutely no way of securing or ensuring that any new jobs created at Collerton Park will be given or employed by anybody in the adjacent area. In the same way that there's actually no way that we can guarantee that anybody living at the new Collerton Park development will work in the new commercial floor space. They could all work in the centre of Plymouth, for all I know, or beyond. So there's no consideration that we can give that, because there's no way we can secure that through a planning permission.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess maybe it's a question for Phil and or the planning team generally, because I take the point about the objections, and it clearly is doubtful that this application meets the neighbourhood plan. But I also understand that we have a tilted balance. We have to be in favour of housing unless there is a significant reason to refuse it. So I guess my question is, how does that new element come to play in this application? Because, you know, do the weaknesses of this application overweigh the preference or the thought that we have to approve through the new tilted balance regulation that we have to comply with?
Councillor Bonham, I'll ask whether, Phil, do you want to address that, or do you want Jack?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Bonham. That is exactly the right question to ask. So yes, you're right. We don't have a 5-year land supply following the introduction of new housing need methodology in December last year. There are kind of two parts to the answer, really. So first of all, the tilted balance. So paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework is what's engaged when a plan is out of date. However, within paragraph 11D, there are certain provisions, even when you don't have a 5-year supply, that we are still required to take into consideration. And one of those, as stated in paragraph 11D2, is directing development to sustainable locations. So we are still guided by sound spatial planning principles that require us not to permit development in unsustainable locations. The other part of that is that such is the extent of a shortfall in our 5-year supply. So we've gone down to a 2.5-year housing land supply. A single dwelling is going to make minimal contribution to that. So the weight that we can give this in terms of boosting housing supply is negligible. It barely registers. So it's the right question to ask, but the overall planning balance in terms of what this contributes is very little to our housing supply, and it doesn't, in my view, offset or mitigate the poor location of the site or the fact that it's inherently unsustainable.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Councillor Hodgson.
Just a random question, really, but if it came back as an affordable offer, as an affordable, you know, in other words, you know, to be put on the register for local need only, would that make it more acceptable? Would that be adequate to mitigate, just so that if anybody's listening, they can understand that?
Who wishes to answer that? Mr. Baker or Jack?
Well, I'm happy to give a view, and Jack can offer hers. But I mean, we can only determine the application that's before us. If the application were for something different, the balance of considerations would be different. But I can't tell you what the result of that would be, because I don't exactly know what the alternative offer would be or how it would be secured.
What Phil said, really. I mean, yeah, absolutely right. You're being asked to consider this application. It's not affordable. It's open market, and I think what I'd also say is that the location is unsustainable, but there are other reasons for refusal that you need to be aware of as well, in terms of drainage, the size of the dwelling not being appropriate in accordance with the neighbourhood plan and Dev 8, and the fact that they haven't provided any mitigation for the impact a new dwelling will have on the Tamar EMS area. So yeah, there are other reasons as well, just to remind you.
Thank you, Ms. Houselander. Any other questions? Councillor Rake.
Sorry, Chair, are we moving on to questions to the officer now? I mean, because those were largely.
We are, because Phil covered, extensive, but there are, I gave Phil, because he was here, the opportunity to cover, so we will move on to questions. Otherwise, Mr. Gard will feel that she's sort of redundant in the operation. Right, thank you. Councillor Rake.
I have a slight allergy to gnats, and also the minimum space standards. Just to be clear, they are a minimum. There's nothing that says they shouldn't or mustn't be exceeded.
They are minimum, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. They are minimum standards. I think the point that the case officer is making, though, is that this is well above what would normally be identified in the minimum space standards for a 3-bedroom dwelling. I think there was a previous, was it an application or was it a pre-app? There was a pre-app where the dwelling that was submitted was much larger, and it's now gone back in as a 3-bedroom house on the basis of the policy in front of you. But the size of the dwelling is such that it could be much more than that. And so the case officer has sort of concluded that actually it's well above what would be expected of a 3-bedroom house, and as such, does that actually address housing need?
So just a couple of things. One is, I mean, can you clarify when the minimum space standards were set? Because obviously the way people use their houses has changed since the pandemic, etc. So I just want to make sure that that is reflected in that.
So I think the fact that the way people use housing has changed. I don't know the exact date when the space standards came into being. I could probably find that out for you if you give me a moment. But they've been in place for a long while now, and accord with the JLP timescales. I think the fact of the matter is, what the purpose of the neighbourhood plan policy is to try to encourage smaller housing in areas such as Newton and Noss, because there's a raft of much larger dwellings, and that means that makes it very difficult for the local population, young families and what have you, to be able to afford to live in such areas. And so the focus is very much about trying to deliver smaller, more affordable housing, and the size of this would be such that even though they're only identifying 3 bedrooms, it would be probably beyond the realms of some of them more local families that need that housing.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, you wish to come in?
Sorry, I put my hand down because Jack effectively said what I was going to say. Other than, I mean, in the JLP and the SPD, we do recognise that it's important to have internal space that can support homework and study. But the extent of the internal floor space here is such that, and the exceedance of the national space standards is such that it goes well beyond allowing any kind of additional flexibility of internal floor space, and the overall scale and size of the dwelling does not align with the clear intent of the neighbourhood plan policy and what we seek to achieve through policy Dev 8.
Thank you. Councillor Rake.
So I'm and I think this is why I'm allergic. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if you've got a minimum standard, if you tick that box, you move on, no further consideration. Are we worried? I mean, so if it was a 2-bedroom house, but that significantly exceeded minimum, are we worried about sneakiness? I suppose is one of the things. Are we worried that because it's so big for a 3-bedroom house, they might in future sneak a 4th bedroom, a 5th bedroom in there, or is it just that we don't? I mean, if we've got a minimum standard, if it's met, I really don't understand why it remains a consideration. The consideration is, does it meet the minimum standard? If it does, then no further discussion is necessary, in my view, but I realise I might be an outlier in that.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I think if members cast their minds back to applications that have been before us, we've had considerably sized properties that have had, 2, 3, 4 bedroom, much bigger. So, which that same argument, that same question has come up previously, and we don't have a maximum size, which I think JLP may address in the future. You never know. Right. Any other questions of Mr. Guard on the officers? If not, thank you. We now move on. We don't have an objector today, but we do have the supporter, Ms. Emma Jones, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you. You've got your 3 minutes, and I understand you've got some slides as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to use your microphone.
Yeah, you did say that. I forgot the first point. Thank you for this opportunity to present our case. So our proposal for a single 3-bed dwelling to replace a dilapidated garage building, which is no longer fit for purpose and is full of asbestos. That's on the first slide there. The 4 garages are an eyesore within a cul-de-sac, and removing them and replacing them with an in-keeping dwelling should be seen as a planning gain. The proposal is for a self-built small family home and supported within the policy N3P11. Within the Newton and Noss neighbourhood plan, Colleton Park provides much needed housing that is affordable to local families within the Newton and Noss parish. The proposal will free up one of these houses and provide us with an affordable family home in a location that we love to live. The site is in an established hamlet of Colleton Park, just outside Newton Ferris. It is clear from the layout of the development that the proposed site was originally intended as a separate dwelling. However, for whatever reason, the original developers decided, therefore, the proposals are making use of what was essentially a redundant plot. The site is already classed within domestic curtilage. It is not a new build in the countryside as implied. There is already a building in the position of the proposed dwelling. Whilst the site is outside of the settlement boundary as defined within the Newton and Noss neighbourhood plan, no reference is made within the document to the established hamlet of Colleton Park. The adjoining mixed-use development currently under construction, also called Colleton Park, is now underway. The windows are presently being installed within the first set of houses. This consisting of 125 new homes, a community hub, cafe, parkland, allotments. This new site is already connected to Newton Ferris via a footpath and will soon have a designated bus stop. I did actually send my children to school along the footpath, and I cycled with them and walked with them to school. They've now left the local school, but I did that for 5 years. The proposed site is already connected to the footpath. This demonstrates the already established hamlet of Colleton Park will be enhanced by the additional new development, making the proposed dwelling and the rest of the hamlet a sustainable location with links to the local amenities. The proposal is for a 3-bedroom dwelling. We both work from home, so have allowed for a home office for my husband and myself. I work as a massage therapist and have a sports massage room at home. Whilst there is currently an oversupply of 4-bedroom houses in the parish, there is currently only 35.8% of 3-bedroom houses, with the national average being 40%, according to the Office for National Statistics. Therefore, there is currently a lack of 3-bedroom houses, creating a local need. Within the application consultation period, additional information was requested for the surface water drainage design. However, we are wary to invest further unless we are more certain we could obtain planning approval. An issue
with the size of the garage has also been identified. However, we'd be more than happy to address both of these issues. The Parish Council have requested that the application is broken down into two separate applications, the garage extension number 4 and also the new dwelling. And again, we'd be very happy to do this if we were more certain of
Ms
an
Jones,
approval.
can I ask you to finish up?
And that is the end anyway.
Good.
So thank
Perfect.
you again
Perfect.
for the chance to do this. I don't do these things often.
Perfect timing. Well done. Right, thank you. Members, any questions to Ms Jones? Councillor Abbott?
Hi.
Hi.
Going back to Councillor Nix's first question, which was the context here, I had the impression that the ex-army houses might have been single-storey bungalows, and
No.
this, when I see your lower picture there, am I seeing a setting which is not so divorced from the building that you're proposing?
Yeah, that's our house. We are still on yet. That's what I want to point out. That's our house here. That's our house here. These are the garages along there.
And there's a house behind those garages. I guess that's.
In the following the street and the house. That's the street behind. Yeah.
And that's all part of the same estate.
We're in Collerton Park. Yeah, it's a collection of houses.
Is there a second slide that should have been shown?
No, there's another slide. That is showing the development that is taking place right now and where we are. Oh, yeah, you can see where we are there. And that's the development that's taking place. And the path is just along the inside there. And yeah, it's been there for a very long time. Like I said, I cycled my kids to school on that path.
Was the path 60 miles an hour?
No, it's basically you come along the inside, you come along the shielded part that was shown before, then you cross the road and there is a path on the other side of the road and it is off the road. There's a gravel path off the road. So I didn't put them on the road. No, we were, I've got junior children. We cycled on the path that is at the side of the road and it's built from, I can come up again. The path goes all the way to the end of the development, then you cross the road, and then they've built a gravel path on the side of the road. And yeah, it was very safe.
Thank you, Ms Jones. Councillor Bonham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I want to raise a different topic, which is to do with the garages. So when we look at any development, parking is a premium, and we'll often get complaints there's not enough place to park. So could you explain the garages? Do you own the garages? Who parks there?
Yeah.
Where will the cars go if they're demolished? And secondly, you mentioned affordable housing in your speech a moment ago, and I don't really understand that. Could you explain that a little bit more? So two parts of my question. Thank you.
So the garages, our street goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there was going to be a 5, 6 where the garages are. And then it goes on the opposite side of the street, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And they didn't, for some reason, don't really know why, they didn't build 5, 6. They just put 4 garages there. The garages are, as I mentioned, dilapidated and asbestos roofs. They need replacing. And so, yeah, is that what you were asking about the garages? What
What I was asking, if I may try again, is who owns the garages and who parks there, and where
we
the
own the garages.
and where the cars would go.
So we've got 2 plots. Our sort of house was with when we bought the property. It was the people who lived in the house before us had bought the garages and the second plot, and we bought it because it was a lovely garden for our kids. But the garages are. We use one of the garages and the others are empty because they're not watertight. They're not really fit for purpose. And so, yeah, we own them. And in terms of parking in front of it, there isn't, it's a bottom of a cul-de-sac and there is plenty of parking. Everyone has their own parking spaces in the street. So it's not somewhere that the neighbours park anyway. They don't park there, and there's plenty of parking elsewhere because it's the bottom of a cul-de-sac.
Jones, that's
Yeah.
answered your question?
Yes, I secondly asked about your mention of affordable house. I didn't really understand that. Could you elaborate what you mean? I mean,
Well-
which house is affordable for whom?
Well, so my husband has led most of this, and he would like to have been here today, and he is unfortunately called to London to work for a meeting, and so I'm reading something that he put together with the architect. I know that in terms of size, if that we both do work from home, so we would need offices. I need a room and he needs an office. But in terms of size, if it was a size issue, then we would be happy to reduce the size of things further. And if that made things more affordable, but that is as much as my understanding goes. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms Jones. Councillor Abbott.
I just wonder what you think about this, that if you were in your new house,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be in your current house, and your current house might be described as an affordable house for someone else to move into. Wasn't that what came out of the?
Yeah, I think maybe that's what he was trying to say. Yeah.
Is that okay, Lee?
Is that what you
Thank
meant?
you for that clarification, Councillor Abbott. Your interpretation
Thank you.
of it. Members, any more?
I mean, they are cheaper houses at Colleton Park, because they are. They're not the grand houses of Newton Ferris, and they are slightly out. 1 minute we're sort of connected, and then people are saying we're not connected, and it's a bit of a mismatch on.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. Is this footpath an adopted footpath, or is it something that's just been used over time?
It was put in. I think my husband said he thinks it was. We were trying to guesstimate when it was 2009. I think they put the footpath in, and it's been there ever since. So long before this development, the footpath has been there, and we've been using it to get our kids to school.
But it goes across the new development. Is that correct?
It's on the outside of the new development,
It's on the
so
outside.
it's not really being affected by the new development because it's along the outside of the Newton Ferryman and it's shielded from the road up until the end point there.
Yeah.
And then it crosses the road, and then goes into goes up to Butts Park.
Yeah. So you got to cross the road.
You do have to cross the road,
okay.
and then you're quickly at Butts Park, the other housing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Jones. Members, any further questions? If not, thank you. Thank you, Ms Jones.
Thank you.
We now move.
Yeah.
If you'd like to switch, thank you. We now move on. We don't have anyone from Newton Noss Parish Council or a statement, but we do have the ward member, Councillor Eadie, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I called this in for the principle that we're already discussing around whether this is a sustainable location. I just have one question though. Was there a site visit to Monroe Avenue?
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't. Okay, because a lot of the questions are coming up that would have answered that. That you would have already had answers to, because unhelpfully you have Colleton Park, and then you have Colleton Park. Colleton Park is the name of the existing development that happened pre-war or around that post-war period, and then you have Colleton Park, which is a development of 125 houses, which is happening now. So that might be sort of confusing to some extent in your eyes, because unhelpfully the developer has established it as a Colleton Park when actually it's going to be called something else in the future. So that might help to some extent. But coming back to the point, I mean, I just thought I would provide a small amount of context, and that is that to the ward officers, to the ward members, I should say, what if this is not a sustainable location, then we need to establish what is, because 120 houses that are right next to 20 to 30 established houses would seem to be sustainable to us. In my mind's eye, at least, that's not disregarded. It's not to seek to disregard the officer who clearly brought would seem to be the right point to bear here. But it's simply that it would help us, and I think that the parish council also have an email from Chris Phillipson who feels similar in terms of her view on whether this is or isn't a sustainable location would be helpful. And so that is the main reason why we felt it was appropriate to be brought into committee. I do know that there are other issues to bear, but this felt like the most substantive.
Thank you, Councillor Eadie. Are there any questions of Councillor Eadie? Councillor Bonham.
Do you think I mean, you are the local ward member. Do you think it's a sustainable location? And the reason I asked that, or the information, is that according to the JLP, it's not. But we can see, I think, from this map, there's a path between the proposed site and a community hub, a bus stop. We've heard that there's a school there, there's a cafe, and there's a recreation area. So, what's your opinion, Tom?
Well, I think this is what I'd like to establish. As a local resident, I can see, and there has been a lot of debate around the new development, which is going to affect members who already, residents who already live in the nearby larger settlements of Newton Ferrers and Nottingham Mayo. We understand that the main trunk road coming out will be reducing its speed to 40 miles an hour. I think that was already mentioned earlier. And pathways are in place. There is a sort of I suppose, an expectation that facilities at Upper Colleton Park are going to be very exciting, and facilities probably beyond that actually will exist. But nevertheless, I think the impression is that that links will be improved, but they are not in place at the moment. And quite understandably, unless they are, it is hard to be confident that they are, or certain for that matter, that it will be as established as one might think. But it seems to me, on the face of it, that once it is built, there will be these sort of services and facilities. There already are the footpaths that were established by the parish council some years ago at some cost, which has already been discussed. So I think right now it feels as if it's there is a question that this might be ignoring the reality on the ground, that there are a number of houses that are about to be built and delivered.
Councillor Eadie, before I bring in Councillor Dommett, I'm just going to bring in Ms Houselander.
So I just wanted to try to explain about sustainable development. Obviously, it's in the National Planning Policy Framework and also in our JLP. And what we try to do in terms of applying those policies is to ensure that development doesn't happen in an unsustainable location. In this case, we have a development, as I said previously, the first Colleton Park, actually I think known as Munro Close, partly, and that is an historic development which happened for a very specific reason, I would suggest. Colleton Park, as Phil has explained, was granted, it was a balanced decision based on the benefits that were coming forward from it. In the main, 46% affordable housing. As you'll all know, it's very difficult to get affordable housing on bigger sites, and 46% met the exception policy. I think if we were to decide, or if you were to decide at some point, or we could in the future, that this should be a settlement, the way to achieve that is through the local plan process and the review of a local plan. It is not for development management applications or single applications to redefine what this area is. It is not a sustainable location, and the routes into Newton is a 60-mile-an-hour road. And whilst there has been some description of a footpath, I can't see it on a Google map, which was done in 2024. And if there is that route, is it for the whole length? Because it is a busy road and it's a fast road, and that partly is why, part of the sustainability issue. It's also, it will be as a the people that live there currently probably do rely on their car to get to where they need to the facilities, either in Yelmpton or in Newton. So you know, in all of the senses of what sustainable development is, I'd point you to SBT 2 in the plan, and this proposal does not meet that.
Thank you, Ms. House. I'll just bring in Phil Baker and then I'll come back. Phil, would you like to comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. The reason why we use the adopted development plan as a basis for decision making is to ensure consistency and to avoid ad hoc decision making or ad hoc interpretations or assumptions around locations. So the named sustainable villages in the joint local plan were identified following assessment against a series of criteria that were then subject to public examination and found to be sound by an inspector appointed by the Secretary of State. Your adopted development plan tells you where sustainable development is going to be located, and that is within an adjoining named sustainable settlement. It couldn't be much clearer. Whilst I understand that there may be a development that's in construction in this remote location, so bearing in mind even the new Collerton Park, and I do admit that that is confusing, even the new Collerton Park development is considered an unsustainable location, until all of those additional facilities are created, and it remains to be seen whether or not they'll all be delivered as per the original permission. The status of the site is it's a tier 4 location. It's not adjoining or within a named sustainable settlement, and it needs to be considered as such, and the relevant policies need to apply as the case officer has done so, and in doing that has resulted in a clear reason for refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Councillor Dommett had a question for you, but do you want to?
I think the only thing I was going to, and I hear the robust answer from the planning officers, which I appreciate, are totally appropriate. I would only just say, with lack of the site visit, you would be able to establish that footpath is in place, and I think it's important that as a detail when it comes to examining this example, the footpath has been established certainly for the full period at which I've been living in that locale. Sorry,
Councillor Dommett.
Thank you. I was just wondering how you feel about the space available for 2 dwellings being used for just 1.
I think that's really for the committee to decide. It isn't. I don't have an opinion on it.
To save you, Councillor Eadie, we're deciding on what is before us, not potentially what could be. I think that's.
But hasn't it been raised as a reason for refusal that it's too big?
Yes, but we're looking at the plans before us. I think we may all agree that it's too big, but it's a case of we have to.
So I was asking for the local ward member to say whether they agreed with that or not.
Is it the scale of the single house that has been planned yet to be built that you're referring to, whether it's too big or not? And that again, I have heard the applicant and the reasons behind that, which feel like they are quite clear. Equally dispassionately, you can see that others might draw a different opinion. So this is why I say I think it's more appropriate for the committee to decide.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Dommett. I thought you were talking about should there be 2 houses on that particular plot rather than 1. I misinterpreted, so apologies.
No, I was trying to point to if there is a local need for housing and we are taking up too much space with 1, then it's worth considering
Thank you.
that in this.
Yeah, point made. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Hodgson.
This isn't a question for Councillor Eadie. I just wonder if it would be appropriate, given the fact that we're just all sort of struggling to understand the site itself, and it has been suggested that we haven't had a site visit. I just wonder if we should defer this for a site visit and we'll settle it in our minds, because I'm looking at the planning statement for this, which says that the pre-application inquiry, which was submitted, the initial response was that the principle of a new residential dwelling was considered to be acceptable, subject to the detailed design and subject to the adjacent development being implemented. So maybe if we can just get a grip on exactly where it's sitting and what that feels like. And I mean, I don't know whether then, therefore, from the pre-app, what should be read into that is, well, just step back, withdraw, and then come back in a couple of years' time when the other developments come in. I don't know. But I just feel we're kind of grappling with something that seems to be difficult to understand, that it's unsustainable when there seems to be a quite a long-standing hamlet that's been thriving. Okay.
Can I ask Mr. Gard to come back in there, please? Thank you.
Yeah, the pre-app response that was done by my colleague Lucy Hall is in full in my report at the beginning, which states no off support with or without the Colleton Park development. So there were some discussions with the agent as well, and that is what the pre-app response was in 2022.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Panel?
Yes. Not dismissing what the pre-app advice was, but from what Mr. Baker and Ms. Houselander have said, it does suggest that it might be possible to reconsider the sustainability of this whole site once the development is completed, from what they were saying, which to my mind, if we accept that, negates the need to go for a site visit at the moment, because I think this application is premature. I think if those facilities are constructed, and as has been pointed out, we have no guarantee they will be, but we hope they will be. If they are constructed, then we could look at the whole of that site again. I think this is premature. I don't think we should be approving it at this stage. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into a debate at this stage.
I just
wanted
moved
to ask
into the debate question there.
Could I just ask about that principle of possibly looking at the sustainability issue again once the whole new development is completed?
You're talking about as Mr. Baker raised, about the settlement creation as a settlement redefinition. Ms. Houselander?
Yes, so yes, I think probably Phil would agree, but this isn't a settlement currently. I think that's the key. That's the key for you to know. And if at some future date, because of the amount of development, if it happens, it is decided that it should be a settlement. That is for that should come out through the review of the local plan, and should then be identified in the local plan if that were to be the case.
Thank you, members. Any further questions of Councillor Eadie? If not, thank you. Thank you. That concludes the speakers for this application. We now move into the debate on this application. So anybody who wishes to come forward, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. This map is just so such a parallel to what was happening in Ugborough Parish not so long ago, where the boundary came along the road, David's Lane, and you could develop to the left, and then instead of following the lane exactly, it took out a square, a property, and then continued along David's Lane again. And it was told that that property could not be developed because it wasn't within the line. It's just amazing to me. And the whole of the new estate got developed, and the arguments went on, and eventually this jinked out square was included, and change was allowed to happen. When you look at that diagram, there is a thick green line going from north to south, which divides what is otherwise, in the way it's been drawn, a whole. W-H-O-L-E. There is development with two-storey houses in the eastern side, and there will, within a short time, because we're up to the windows now, going to be two-storey houses on the western side. I think I can see a footpath on Google Earth. Actually, I can't see it on Street View, but our resident here was cycling along it for 9 years or something. I don't think we're taking a whole picture. That's the whole picture. What are we doing saying, oh, you can't do anything in that little eastern bit when so much is going on the western bit? Mr. Fairburn will tell me why.
Mr. Fairburn would like to come in, Councillor Abbott.
Yes, Chair, but I'm hearing a lot of kind of emotive speeches, but I'm not hearing anything referring to the development plan policy itself. And you have a development, as I said right at the very beginning, you must make your decision in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations suggest otherwise. The development plan quite clearly has identified a tiers of hierarchy of settlements as sustainable. This is not in that list, and until the joint local plan is reviewed and it takes into account the fact there's been a large development to the west, then this doesn't become a sustainable location. What I would also say to you is that this is, as Mr. Baker said, this Colleton Park 2 was a rural exception site. And as a rural exception site, it obviously delivered a number of benefits. But what it didn't mean as a result of it being developed as a rural exception site is that it became a sustainable location, and that could then permit further development. Because if that was the case, then every rural exception site that you approve would become a sustainable location without going through any proper planning process.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Pannell and Councillor Bonham. Sorry, Councillor Bonham was first. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. This has become quite a complex case, and I'm starting to feel a lot of sympathy with the applicant, to be honest, because we're getting into the detail of, you know, the words in our policy and what they really mean. I mean, I'm also got quite a bit of sympathy with the planning team because, you know, there's three important factors here that sort of argue against approval. So let me try and think through one at a time. You know, we're clearly advised as a planning committee not to support an application that is not in a sustainable location. And very clearly, according to our joint local plan, this is not a sustainable location. But we're also advised that we should be guided by material factors. And I would have thought that 120 or whatever there are houses built next door, if I have the right figure, 125, it is a material factor. So, you know, we've got a location that's not a sustainable location, but maybe should be if our joint local plan was updated. I'm happy to, honestly, to wait for the JLP to be updated. I think we need to go through the proper process on that. So, you know, on sustainability, I'm inclined to agree with the officers. On size and housing mix, where the officers don't like the size of this 3-bedroom property, I really worry that we're being very picky, quite honestly. I read what we've got written in the neighbourhood plan, but this is a 3-bedroom property, and yes, it could be extended to 4, but so could a lot of things. We could build a dividing wall in many properties and add an extra bedroom. I think we're being quite unfair to local people when we refuse this, because it's not substantially changing, in my opinion, the housing mix in this ward, in this area, which must have 1,000 or more houses. One extra 3-bedroom house is not going to make the place more unaffordable, in my opinion. So I'm sort of feeling that we're being over fussy on that point. The third point on drainage, I tend to accept that if there's not a drainage solution, we shouldn't proceed. So overall, I think if we don't accept this, I would suggest that the applicant comes back when more of the site is developed, or where the joint local plan has considered whether this is a sustainable location or a settlement or not. But at the moment, it's on balance not one that I would support at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Bonham. Councillor Pannell.
Yeah, I also have sympathy with the applicant, but I do take on board that at the moment this is going against both the joint local plan and the neighbourhood plan. Also, in addition, as has been pointed out, there isn't a drainage scheme that's been accepted, and there's been no contribution to the Tamar European Marine Site. Those are all significant factors which we are normally very hot on enforcing. I don't think we would normally accept anything that didn't have a proper drainage plan accepted for a start. I think it is premature. I think if the new Colleton Park development is built out and those facilities are provided, I agree with Councillor Bonham that there should be a review and a look at whether that can become a settlement and be accepted. Because I don't think one house on that other site is going to make much difference either way. But in view of the way this conflicts with the local plan and the neighbourhood plan, I would propose refusal in line with officers' recommendation.
Give you a few minutes to look at that. Councillor Pannell, can I just clarify the reasons for refusal? You're backing the officer's reasons for refusal, right? Thank you. Members, I'll continue. I'll bring in Councillor Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think we're putting too much weight on what might happen next door, because if this wasn't coming up, we would refuse this out of sight, to be honest, because it's not a sustainable site. And I think we're putting too much weight. We're spending too much time thinking about what might happen next door in the next field, because that was an old aerodrome, as we all know. We don't know when or if that will be developed, so we can't judge this one, I don't think, on what might happen in the adjoining fields. So I'm reluctant, but I'm going to second Councillor Pannell's reason and go with the officer on refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. I am struggling with this one because sustainable communities are about creating the kinds of places where people of all ages and circumstances want to live, as it says in the big book. We've got a couple of outcomes in front of us here. One is a development that has proposed that rounds off the end of this historic development, and the other is 4 mouldering garages. And you wonder which would be more likely to be the kind of place where people of all ages and circumstances want to live. And I think, you know, if that's the core of sustainability, and I think that's as good a definition as any, although I quite like the United Nations one as well. I do struggle, and I mean, I know that colleagues might tire of my camel and gnats, but
What about elephants and mice?
Mine comes from the Bible. But I do think it's in terms of and I absolutely take the point that this was a gravy camel, but I think the relative scale is such that I don't know. I feel the mood of the meeting is such that I'm going to be on my own on this one, but I'm struggling to support Councillor Pannell and Taylor's motion that we refuse this one, I must admit.
Thank you, Councillor Rake. Councillor Carson.
I think I'm in agreement with Councillor Rake. I'm struggling and I have a lot of sympathy for the applicant, because where does this leave the original Colleton Park residents? And they were allowed to purchase those homes all those years ago. So why is it unsustainable now when it was sustainable for them to be allowed to live there? And to me, it just looks like an infill of a site.
Thank you.
What definition of sustainability are we using? I did a quick search in the JLP, but I didn't notice.
So policy SPT1, SPT2, paragraph 11 in the NPPF. Got any more?
If it would help, Chair. Can I have, because I have the text in front of me, I could.
Can I just, drawn to my attention that Councillor Hodgson has been waiting patiently. I haven't seen, and I don't wish to fall foul of Councillor Hodgson. So, if you'd like to come in, Councillor Hodgson.
Not that scary, thank you. No, I just wanted to, actually I support what Councillor Rake and Councillor Carson have just said. So you're not alone there, Councillor Rake, after all. I mean, I think it's not gnats and camels, it's also a brownfield site. And I think that's one of the things we're forgetting. A lot of our policies are based on greenfield sites. This is a classic brownfield site, and it has already been said about mouldering garages, and not just mouldering garages. They've got a very dangerous substance on them, which the older it gets, the more it fluffs up, the more it creates dust, and the more dangerous it is to get rid of. And, for garages that don't have an awful lot of merits in the area, except perhaps somewhere that people end up, youngsters can end up sneaking into and having accidents or finding for drugs, etc. That garages can often be a worry. Not saying, sorry, not casting aspersions, but, I'm just making the case that, what's the point of 4 garages, which is sort of suggesting an unsustainable location as opposed to another home, which we know there's a need for homes. And I think, for me, I think this would actually, if it went to appeal, it would get through. So I just feel, I'm not, saying that's the only reason that I think we should sort of consider it strongly. But it's actually, it's what do we think should be in that area. And I know we struggle with the fact that we don't know whether the adjacent development is going to go through. I mean, having waited, 15 odd years, long years for transition homes to finally get spades in the ground, they can take longer than expected. But it's a place that's got, it has a distinctiveness. It has a sense of place. It's got a community. It's not just an isolated house in the middle of nowhere. It does have merits in terms of being part of a hamlet and community. And I just feel I'm not going to vote against this.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I've got Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Again, sort of, if you were to stand back and not be part of a planning committee, if I was going to be sort of looking at my neighbours, I'd think it was completely reasonable site. It makes absolute sense. It's ridiculous that you can give permission to an enormous site but not give permission to a small site. But we are governed by the rules and regulations of the local plan and neighbourhood plan, and the point of consistency really has struck home, because there's a sort of cherry picking aspect to this, and I don't always go with officer recommendation, but I'm minded at the moment to go. I mean, there's fairly serious and weighty considerations as to why they've recommended refusal. If I was the applicant's neighbour, I would say absolutely fabulous that she's building a house, get rid of the things, all of those type of things make absolute sense to me. But we are governed by the rules and regulations of our local plan and looking at neighbourhood plans, and so therefore I think I will go with, I'm minded at the moment at least to go with Councillors Taylor and Panel and can't remember all your surnames in a row, and whatever your surname is.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Was the question of definition of sustainability, I don't know whether Jackie you wish to do it, or Mr. Baker?
Well, I could read the policy out, which is quite lengthy, so I don't really want to do that. But I think whilst Councillor Rake did refer to the text supporting the policy, he didn't actually refer to the aspects of the policy which we, as planning officers, have to utilise when we're dealing with planning applications and recommend to you based on those policies. And indeed, as David said at the beginning, it is your obligation, if you like, to look at the development plan, which is the JLP, and the policies in it when making those decisions. Things like have reasonable access to a vibrant mixed-use centre which meets daily community needs. This area does not have that. You'd have to get in a car or a bike or walk, and it's 2.5 kilometres, as I understand it, from Newton Ferries. It also talks about having a good balance of housing types. So I think the comments earlier about Colleton 2, there is a reasonable balance in that development because they have the higher percentage of affordable housing. I don't know the absolute details of the sizes and tenures of all of those properties, but I would imagine there's a mix, and that hence that was approved in an unsustainable location. This proposal doesn't offer any of those similar benefits. There are other definitions. Well served by public transport, walking and cycling opportunities. I acknowledge that the Colleton 2 will potentially involve a new bus stop. It's not there now. And invariably, with sort of larger developments, sometimes the obligations signed up to at the beginning of the process don't always happen. So again, I think we need to just be aware that this location is not sustainable. It's not easy to get by public transport, walking or cycling to Newton Ferries or indeed Yelpton. Other items included in the policy have services and facilities that promote equality and inclusion and that provide for all sectors of the local population. Again, these sorts of matters are things that occur in villages and in sustainable villages. They don't naturally occur here or in small hamlets, hence the fact that it lies within a tier 4 of policy TTV1, which is small villages, hamlets and the countryside.
Thank you. Can I bring in Mr. Baker, please? Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Chair. The NPPF and the adopted development plan provide you with the definition and the basis of sustainable development. The nature of the exercise for DM committee is not to come up with their own interpretation of what is sustainability. The reason why we have adopted policies and the National Planning Policy Framework is to ensure that we apply the same parameters to all applications in a consistent and transparent way. What may or may not be happening in the garages by young people in the area or the materials that are in those garages are immaterial to the outcome of this application. You've got a clear policy framework in front of you, and this application needs to be determined in accordance with what the adopted policies say. I understand the specific circumstances do make there's some kind of noise around it that has added to some of the confusion, but we need to block that out and apply the policies as written and respect the fact that there's neighbourhood plan policies that have been adopted that reflect local aspirations for how change will be managed. And the case officer has balanced all of those considerations. And I think you've got quite a clear recommendation in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. If there are any other, I've got Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Pannell.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, if this application is approved, it means you're ignoring the JLP, which took a long time to organise, and we use that as our planning Bible. And if we approve this at this stage, I'm not saying it never would be approved, but at this stage, I think if it's approved, then you're just ignoring what's in front of us and what's been recommended. Thank you.
Councillor Pannell.
Well, it's also the neighbourhood plan, and a lot of effort goes into producing a neighbourhood plan, and this appears to be contrary to that as well. But I wanted to ask, if members were minded to approve it, where do we stand with the fact that there's no surface water disposal scheme approved and no contribution to the Tamar marine site?
If members decide to approve this application, there would be no requirement for drainage because that's the reason for refusal. So it could be constructed effectively without that. And equally, there would be no contribution which is required to support the Tamar EMS.
Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, guys. Oh, councillors. If we're taking these statements at face value from the officers, there is no opportunity to do anything except interpret the joint local plan in the way that officers tell us. That is not why we're a committee here. We're a committee to form judgment over difficult decisions and to choose one way or the other. I guess that. Crumbs, I'm in trouble again.
please finish your comments, Councillor Abbott.
I guess that according to the applicant, they haven't gone any further so far because they're worried about costs. And from a perspective of this committee, it could be said, well, those would be conditions that it wouldn't go forward until those elements were agreed. So it's not a question that we're overruling the JLP. And actually, for all that I'm arguing here, I'm arguing for the independence of this committee more than I'm going to go one way or the other. And as a statement of opinion, I suppose, is all it is, that the recommendation that my colleague here suggested that this is maybe a little too early, and it would satisfy then if those facilities were developed on Colleton too, so that there was more of a community. Mind you, crumbs, if you're cycling to school at 5 years old, and you're an older person on the eastern limits of Ivybridge, and you've got to get into Ivybridge sometimes. And I'm not trying to define sustainability. We asked what the definition of sustainability was. It feels sometimes as though I am being bamboozled rather than, educated, taken along with the process. I don't like that, really.
Councillor Allen.
I must say, I pretty much disagree with everything Councillor Abbott just said. Sorry, Vic. We're at liberty to look at them in their merit, and I think if the refusals are this comprehensive, then we need to take that into account. Sometimes it's much more on the edge, and don't forget these are proposals brought forward by the ward member, and sometimes the ward member brings them forward because they genuinely are on the edge, or there's a series of objections, or people don't totally understand. At that point, we have a lot more levity to be able to look at them in the round. But I think this one, where it goes against all the documents that we've basically signed up to as planning committee people, and there's no drainage thing, and there's a whole series of other things. I'll say again, I would love to be able to just come down on high and say, yes, you can build that, yes, you can build that, I like the look of that, you can build that, but I can't, and that's not the point of us. I'm very, very happy to go against officer recommendation, and I usually do, to be fair, but I think this is a serious point. I think that the point of consistency, the fact that we seem to be going against all of the most serious documents it matters, and that's what I think. I've also got about 2 minutes before I have to go, so I don't. Sorry, I'm slightly on the edge of my seat and already all packed up. So I'd love to be able to
come in, and then everybody would have spoken.
Listening to Councillor Abbott, I agree with a lot of his points. There was a recent application. I know there's no such thing as precedent before somebody tells me that. A recent thing whereby it was brought to committee passed it, and the drainage and the Tamar, coming from a country, contribution was paid before something was put in the ground. That property is now up and it looks beautiful, and it's been beautifully done. So I don't see that's a problem if we condition it. So it has been done previously.
Thank you. Members, we've debated this and there's been a lot of varied discussion on this. We have a proposer and seconder for support of the officer's recommendation of refusal. I'm going to take it to the vote now. Can I have show of hands for those for refusal as per the officer's recommendation? Those against So there are 7 for refusal, 4 against that application. This application is thereby refused. Thank you for the officer. Thank you for Ms Jones for bearing through this. That concludes the applications before us. We now move on to the further agenda items. Agenda item 7, the planning appeals update. Apologies from Councillor Allen has to leave at this point. Feedback. While we sort out the technical details, we'll have a 5-minute break. Thank you, members. We're now back in session. We'll move to agenda item 7, planning appeals update. Ms. Houslender, if you could take us through these, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm apologising in advance. I'm leaving it in its current state on the screen because I've made some notes and I need to be able to read the notes. And if I put it on the as a film show, I can't read my notes, which is very helpful to you. So apologies in advance. So there are 5 appeals I think we need to talk about today. Pressing the wrong button. First one, Barkington Manor, Staverton. This is the manor house here, quite a large development, and there was a proposal to replace a garden room in this area up here, and it was refused on the basis that it was incredibly divorced from the main house, and also it was on a very high point, and therefore was very prominent. So it's up here, and this is the elevations of the development, and the main issue, as far as the inspector was concerned, was on the character of the area, given its siting, and excuse me, just a moment. I'll just go down to my notes. And the inspector considered that the siting read almost as a separate dwelling, as opposed to a garden room in association with the main house. So he described it as an alien and incongruous building, and it would result in significant harm to the character and appearance of the area and would not be compatible with its open landscape. So the inspector went along with the refusal on that basis. The next one, Porthaven, Dartington, and that was this is the site, so it's adjacent to this site, red line site there. This was for the erection of a fence. The fence was, so if I just go back to that one, the fence was effectively along this road boundary. Is that the old pub? Yes. Yeah, yeah, it is the old pub. Yeah. Yeah.
What was the issue about the fence?
Councillor Panel, can you use your microphone, please?
I'm sorry. Yeah, can you just go into the issue over the fence there? Because I know the site.
I think it was the height and the impact on the character of the area. It's 1.8 metres, so it's quite nearly 6 foot. It might be 6 foot. Yeah. The main issue, as far as the appeal inspector was concerned, was the effect on the dispute, on the appearance and character of the appeal property in its local context, and it was overly utilitarian, is how he described it. Overly utilitarian. That's what I meant. Yeah, I meant to say that. Sorry. And that it dominated the front of the appeal property, which is obviously quite an attractive building. And it's not in keeping with the lighter and attractive metal railings immediately forward of the main elevation, which you can see on the plan there.
It's kind of that orangey kind of timber. I know.
It's stained, I think.
Couldn't have been much worse, really, to be honest.
So that again was dismissed. The next one was the certificate of lawfulness application on this site here, and it was. Can you just see it there? It's just a little dot in the middle of the field. This was actually to gain a certificate of lawfulness for the use of a shepherd's hut, which was already on site, as an ancillary sort of building to the to be used for sort of wash up purposes, for the use of the land, and the council refused it on, and the inspector agreed that it it was, from a character and appearance perspective, not acceptable, but he did then allow the appeal on the basis that it does provide shelter and heating, and a place to use for eating food and what have you for those people working on the land. Its use as ancillary to the use of the land for forestry purposes was therefore allowed. There isn't a forest there currently, but the applicant has planted loads of trees, so it's not in strict terms I think it's quite it's not challengeable, I don't think, but it's an odd position to take because the trees they're just saplings currently. And then the next one is Firm Anchor, Grenville Road, Salcombe. This was refused as an outbuilding. I just moved to the plan. An outbuilding within this site. Move down. This is the outbuilding here, and it was proposed to be used as a boat store, but it's forward. It was forward of the dwelling, which was unusual, and the inspector agreed that it would be out of character with the area in its location. And I was trying to read what it says, and I think it's.
That was allowed.
Oh, was it allowed?
Yes.
Oh, was it? Sorry, apologies for that. And the final one is Rosella, Rennie Road, Haybrook Bay. I'll just show you the location plan. It's a proposed front extension and other extensions to the property. I'll just show you. This is the property that the extensions were proposed on, and this was the proposed extension. Yeah. But interestingly, the inspector agreed. So it was refused on the basis of impact on neighbouring properties, particularly number 7. I'm trying to find this number 7, Lentley Close, because it's very close to the boundary, and there's a levels difference such that effectively the extension would look directly into the dining room of the number 7. So he agreed with us on that basis. So the appeal was dismissed, but he did not agree in terms of the impact it would have on the character and appearance of the area, because he suggested that there were lots of properties along Rennie Road of varying designs, and so therefore he didn't agree with us on that basis. But the neighbour has obviously the impact on the neighbour. It was still dismissed on that basis. But yeah, so in design and impact on the national landscape, he didn't agree at all, which again slightly surprising because it does. So certainly, I don't know the site brilliantly, but it does appear to be quite a large extension, which has quite an impact. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Houselander. As always, if there are any questions that you've got on those appeals, you can go back to Jacqueline or Pat when he is back. We now move on to agenda item 8, which is the update on undetermined major applications, which again is for noting if anybody has any questions on any specific application in there, then if you speak to the officer, that's the standard practice, unless you've got some questions at the moment. If you have any particular questions on it, we'll take it to see whether we can answer them here. Councillor Abbott, Councillor Dominic, you're Jackie, Councillor Hodgson. Certainly, yeah. If nobody has any questions on agenda item 8, that concludes the business for today's Development Management Committee meeting, and I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.